Hey everybody! Today I wanted to talk about a little topic that I think kind of flies under the radar, but it always bothered me as a Jehovah's Witness mom and parent, and really for myself and the family, is the curious case of being unhealthy as a J-dub. So one of the things, I feel like in Europe, service was so hard. We had to walk most of the time. We did not go out in car groups. Maybe we drove to the territory, but then you walked the territory. Maybe it's kind of similar to preaching in New York City, where there's a lot of apartment buildings and you're in all these apartment hallways. It's kind of very hard, and it's labor. And when we moved to the States, boy, did I love being in a car group where you don't have to get out at every house, where you took a door and then two other people took a door and you had a little break. It was such a blessing to me to move to the States, where service was so much easier. And people were friendlier in general too. I think that in Europe, people are not as religiously inclined. And boy, wouldn't you know it, they were pretty awful to us. So coming to America, I just really loved that. But one of the things that was kind of hard to deal with was the food and service. So because service was so much harder in Europe, a lot of times we would go for 1 hour. It would be cold, it would be rainy and wet, and we would just be done for an hour, and then you pretty much go home, or maybe you go to a restaurant or something. But fast food at that time was not on the same scale. We didn't even have a fast food restaurant in every town. It was a special thing. And I'm sure that's changed by now too. But to me, I felt like it was really hard, because when you have kids especially, you feel kind of bad for them for having to be out in service. And so the whole group, they all go to eat fast food, and you don't want to be the one who is a stickler and leaves out the kids, and you feel like you need to reward them a little bit. And so it's pretty much McDonald's every week. And I think most of the people in the congregation could not afford going to Starbucks. So we rarely go there, including me. I couldn't afford Starbucks every Saturday. But McDonald's, the dollar menu, all that stuff, that's what we would do. And for a while there, our McDonald's had burned down, so everyone went to White Castle, and I just wanted to get a coffee and try not to eat the food, and their coffee's terrible on top of that. And you don't really have a choice, because basically your whole service group meets, your service car meets. And then when it was McDonald's, you get the kids a Happy Meal, you get them all the junk food, and you feel horrible because every single week it's fast food for them. And even if you try to pack a lunch, that goes out the window so quickly, because you're not going to be the one whose kids just worked in service, and then they get to watch everyone else have a Happy Meal. It just doesn't really work. And so this was a routine every Saturday, plus an expensive routine. Honestly, we were pretty poor. It's just sadly a statistic of Jehovah's Witnesses is that low education, not a lot of money. And we were always struggling. So then having to go and spend money while you're out in service, plus gas and all this, is very, very hard. And I remember when I started to fade, just thinking, I haven't been to a McDonald's in months. Felt so good, because I don't have a desire to feed my kids that crap. I really try for them to eat pretty healthy, and service to me equaled being unhealthy. So one of my best friends, and she really, really was a very good person, always tried to do everything right, was very kind and helpful. But her and her kid, they would go in service every single day that she didn't have to work. So she was a full-time working single mom with a kid. And I think it was just the guilt trip from the society. And if she didn't go in service, she would feel guilty. And so the days that she did work, her mom was a pioneer, so the mom would take the kid out in service. So this little kiddo was in service all week. And I remember saying to her, I don't think it's like a good childhood for the kids. We even had a circuit overseer who had seen so many kids grow up in the back of a minivan in service that left. And the circuit overseer said from stage, please give your children a childhood and don't have them grow up in the back of a minivan, which we thought was really wow, look at him. That's really balanced and that's really so loving and kind toward the kids. And he was right. And I always had that in my mind and I agreed with that. And so to me, I just felt so bad for her kiddo, and the kiddo in turn, when they would have long pioneer days, they would stop at gas station. And notoriously, gas stations have horrible food. I mean, talk about food coloring additives, sugar, preservatives, artificial flavors, everything. That's what the gas station offers you. And they would get slushies and drink Gatorade all day and just food coloring and sugar galore. And it broke my heart for the kiddo because you could tell that it was taking a toll on the kid being in service all the time. And it was a reward. It was a reward to keep them quiet in the back seat, to drag them out in service. And it's almost like, I know that they meant well and they felt like they were doing what is right, but it's kind of almost like child abuse to force children to grow up in service. It's just not normal. I think it's almost bad enough when you take them out on Saturdays alone, but to go out all the time, every single day, and just eat junk food all the time is terrible. And so I had another friend who had pioneered always, and her husband was an elder, and they were sweet people. But her aunt had died and her grandma had died because of heart disease very, very young. And this elder pioneer couple lived off the dollar menu because, again, they didn't have a lot of money. You're in service all the time. And they would joke how the dollar menu is sustaining you. But at the same time, if it's $1, think about the ingredients that are in it. They can't be quality. They're cheap. They're trash. And she had just gotten worse, unhealthy, was having a lot of problems medically, and was really worried about her heart because it was in the family. And her family doctor said to her, you need to really take a look at what you're doing because you're heading toward a heart attack at 35 because you are so incredibly unhealthy. And I remember her laughing, and I was still in the J-dubs at that time, and she laughed and she's like, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because the paradise is right around the corner. And I thought, oh my God, I would not think that way. But that's how she justified it to herself, to eat from the dollar menu every day. And frankly, how do you have time to cook a healthy meal, to grocery shop for a healthy meal? It's a lot of work. And when you're in service for 7 hours and come home exhausted and often work and have a household, you don't have time to cook a fancy dinner or a fancy lunch before the meeting. It takes a lot of planning and effort. So for them, that was the solution, the dollar menu. And the doctor who said you're heading toward a heart attack, that was 10 years ago now, and their lifestyle has not changed. Quick story about those two. They are lovely people, and they had moved. He was a Bethelite, and he left Bethel, and then he got married, and he was assigned to a congregation very, very rural, to help that congregation out. It was a lovely little hall, very small. And they ended up building a house there and made that house their home. It was just so cute. And wouldn't you know, that congregation got dissolved so quickly. And there they were stranded with this house that they know had to try to sell out in a very rural area. And I think that kind of gave them a little bit of a cognitive dissonance too. Like, this is so weird. And in turn, congregations all around were being sold. So the people who lived there really had to travel very far to go to a meeting. In the nighttime, in winter, icy storms, just not an ideal situation. I will talk about this in another episode with all the kingdom halls being sold, because while I was living in that area, it was crazy. Like, every hall was being sold around us. So to me, it was just always the being healthy and, trying to live a life that is free from fast food, or trying to live a life with the kids as a Jehovah's Witness, being somewhat healthy is not easy at all. And I think this is a funny side story. My toddler, this is going to be gross, so hold on tight. In the minivan all the way in the back, you don't get back there very often. And I was pregnant again, so it was really hard to move. And apparently, he just loved the Happy Meals for the apple juice and the toy in there. So he was sitting there one day on a random day. I hadn't been, in service for a few days, and so we hadn't been to McDonald's. And I look back, and he's eating a chicken McNugget. And I looked at him, and I'm like, whoa, what are you eating? And he goes, a nugget, a nuggie. And I'm like, wait, where did you get that from? And he pulled another one out from under his car seat. So I took the car seat out, and the kid had a stash of chicken nuggets under his seat. It turned out that he didn't really care for them usually, and just wanted the toy and the apple juice. And he was very little. I mean, maybe 2.5. He was just always like the little talker, little Mr. Wise guy. And it was so funny. And you could not see his stash till you removed the car seat. And I was just mortified. And what's also really awful is that those things don't rot, because healthy food rots. If you see mold on your food, that's a good thing. It means it's fresh and not full of preservatives. But the McDonald's food did not have any mold or anything of it on it, which is terrifying. Like, watch those videos of McDonald's food, like molding and not molding, versus like if you have a tomato or something, how it molds. So I guess he was little and kind of knew this was crap food and didn't eat it for the most part. But again, what freedom we have now not to be stuck in service on our weekends, to be able to sleep in. That was such a powerful thing to me. There was somebody with a screen name that said, like an Exjw that said, a thinker who can now sleep in. And I was like, I love that. Like, that is so true, because it's Saturday, it's Sunday, it's every day. Wake up the kids, dress the kids, go to McDonald's. Horrible. And so we, quit that whole unhealthy habit and look around at like the Jehovah's Witnesses, how unhealthy they are. And this short view of the world, to think the end is coming any minute. I don't have to take care of myself. It doesn't really matter what I put in my body. That is just making people sick, and they're aging quickly. Plus the amount of stress that you have being in a cult, where the cult just makes you work. It takes a toll on you too. One sister said to me, you can come pick up some hand-me-down suits from her son, which I loved. It was such a blessing for me that her son was older than my son, and I could always get suits, and they were so cute. And so one day before the meeting, I went to her house, and I saw like my favorite elder, who was such a nice guy, who was their neighbor, pull into the driveway. I was dressed for meeting, going to the meeting, just picking up these suits before the meeting. He was just coming home from work. He wore a suit to work so he could just go inside and grab his family and leave to meeting. Plus, then you have elders meetings afterward. That man he worked all day without a break. He probably left the house at 7:30 and came home from the meeting at 11. And I just was really sad for him. I'm like, whoa, I never even realized that is a hard job. And it's not paid. And, I see like so many young guys not wanting to be elders anymore. And it's kind of like a weird phenomenon, because I feel like if you believe this is the truth, and then if you believe it's the truth, you should reach out for privileges, because it doesn't even make any sense to totally believe all this and then not be a servant and not be an elder. Because to me, it's kind of like a PMO mindset to lay off those responsibilities. Because if you're truly like super spiritual and agree with all this, then you should reach out, But we see so many guys not reaching out, and good for them. You don't want to work for a cult. Like, you're smart, except they don't realize they're in a cult. So if you're totally PME, I do not understand not reaching out, because if you totally believe it, it doesn't make sense. But like in our hall, all the elders were elderly. When I had moved to this last hall, we had one elder who was in his 50s, and all the other elders were in their 70s and 80s. And we had plenty of young guys in their 20s and their 30s who did not want to serve. And I thought like some of them may have been PMO, but then it turns out they really weren't, because if I said something, like, they would be completely shocked. But what a weird phenomenon to believe all of this and not reach out for privileges. As like my one friend said, she thinks it's kind of like, she was very spiritual and she thought, it'd be like, I'm a woman, so I can't have these privileges, but I know that if I was a man, I would reach out. It's kind of like somebody's crushed under a car and only Superman can go and help. I wish I could, but I can't. But Superman can go and help. This is her story, not mine. And you're a brother, you can reach out and help the congregation, but you're choosing not to. So as if Superman would choose not to reach out and help the person stuck under the car. That was a Jehovah's Witness mindset. Of course, I don't even believe that anymore, but I understood what she meant at the time, because her brother and her dad did not want any privileges in the congregation anymore. And honestly, it's because her dad was an elder and he went through so much in the congregation. I think he got to the point where he's like, I'm just losing my joy. I don't want to do this anymore, but I want to serve Jehovah. So I'm just going to be a happy publisher. And so for this individual, that's what I think would happen. But we see so much more that they're like vying for people to reach out to have privileges. And sisters, I know, are doing so much more in the congregation, as they should. We should have always had sisters do stuff. Like, why can't sisters do microphones or the book counter? Give me a break. And that irked my grandpa so much too, because he felt like the young ones should be so much more included. Like, let the younger ones do microphones and all this. And in our hall, it ended up being only like elders who did microphones, which was so weird to me. It's like, don't you want to involve all the young guys? The elders are doing the microphones. Okay. No clue why. So, yep, that is my story about health and well-being among Jehovah's Witnesses. If you have stories about health and nutrition, please reach out, leave me a comment. Would love to hear it. This was just something that has always irked me so much, because I really try to be a healthy mom for the kids, and it was just so hard as a Jehovah's Witness. So would love to hear everyone's feedback. See y'all later.